Right on cue. Just a couple logistics for tonight. We will be recording the main presentation, but not the breakout discussions. So if you would not or prefer not to be recorded tonight, please turn off your camera, and we will honor that.
You might remember it. I tried to bike all the way from here to the.
And if it would be helpful if we all can mute ourselves and just unmute when you have a question or something that'd be great. Please feel free to use the three dots at the top of the right of your screen to list your pronouns after your name or any additional information you'd like to share, perhaps the organization or community that you're with or where you live. And if you need closed captions, you can turn on closed captions with the CC button at the bottom of the screen. Before we dive in, we'd like to acknowledge those of us who are here in Seattle. We know that there's a lot of us across King County that are calling in, that have joined us tonight. But those of us who are here in Seattle, we are on traditional land of Indigenous people today, including the Coast Salish and Duwamish tribes, among many others. One of the ways you can support the vitality of the Duwamish tribe, who are not federally recognized, is by making rent payments directly to Real Rent Duwamish. February and all 12 months are time to honor Black history. We honor Black history in our work, our commitment to racial equity, and in ourselves. Before we get started, we're going to do a little poll because we'd like to learn a little bit about you who have tuned in this evening to get a better sense of who's in the room. What's your primary connection to Bikeworks? There are a lot of board and staff members that are here tonight. So we just like to get a little sense of who's on the call and what your interests are. So there will be a poll that will be showing up pretty soon, and go ahead and fill that out. And the poll is, how are you connected to Bikeworks? And again, please feel free to participate freely in that poll. Also, before we go any further, I want to recognize there's several board and staff members here tonight who not only help craft and implement the strategic plan, but are on staff and currently on board that are responsible for implementation of the strategic plan and holding the strategic plan. So those of you who are on board and staff, would you please raise your hand, give a little shout out, acknowledge those who are, and thank you for being here.
I'm suspecting that no one is seeing my poll. Is that true?
I think it went through.
Yeah,
I did it. You're good.
I
got it. You're good.
Got the poll.
Yeah,
Yep.
the poll was a hit. Yeah.
It says no one participated.
Awkward.
So I think let's start with I think some of us are familiar with our strategic plan process, and here's some results of the poll. Can everybody see the results? Seems like a lot of you are supporters, 44%. 15% are bike shop customers. That's great. 7% are volunteers. 11% are program or class participants. It's awesome. 11% are board members. And then 33% are members of staff. That's great. Thank you for participating. So diving in a little bit more, just to frame up kind of our discussion tonight, some of you are familiar with our strategic plan. Some of you are very familiar with Bikeworks. So I wanted to share a little bit about the strategic plan and its process. So we started this process in 2019. It's a 5-year strategic plan. And we partnered with Beloved Communities. They are based out of New Orleans. And this was a year-long process throughout 2019, a little bit in 2020. And involved in that process was current staff members, past staff members, community members, youth, current and past board members, and just really ask some very in-depth questions about Bikeworks and the history of Bikeworks, the direction of Bikeworks, and the future of Bikeworks. And a very important part of this process was Beloved Communities formed a racial equity committee, which I had the fortune to be a part of. And in the racial equity task force, there were 16 members, again, current Bikeworks staff, past Bikeworks staff, participants in our events, in our classes, and community members. And it was a year-long conversation about Bikeworks, how it's showing up in the community, what it could be doing different, what it's doing great and do more of. And what's unique about our strategic plan is something that really caught my attention back in 2019 and still does today, is that the racial equity task force and our racial equity commitment that was generated from the racial equity task force, it is not separate from our strategic plan. Our racial equity task force and our racial equity commitments, our commitment racial equity, are integrated into our strategic plan. So it's one and the same. So our decision making, how we show up in the community, actually part of the process tonight is all done through a lens of racial equity. And they're not two separate documents, they're one document. So it really helps guide us in our decision making in all aspects of our organization. Part of that is accountability, and part of the accountability is reporting out to the group that we're doing tonight.
Ed, you're muted.
Thank you. In our racial equity, our strategic plan, there are 4 different parts of the strategic plan. One is our internal culture. The next is our community engagement. The third is access to jobs. And the fourth is our physical space. To implement our strategic plan, we have formed 3 groups, committees that live among staff. We have a culture committee, a structure committee, and an equity committee. And we are going to be reporting out on different parts of those committees and what we've moved forward this year, in the past 2 years. And members of staff who are also members of the committees will be reporting out on our progress. So this is our two-year report out. First of all, we want to start with our Bikeworks culture. Our goal of ours for the strategic plan is that staff and board reflect the community in which we serve. The majority of our staff and the majority of our board now identifies BIPOC and live in the community and bike in the community of South Seattle and South King County.
Great, thanks, Ed. In addition to that, we have been investing in our staff to promote job satisfaction, reduce turnover, and prioritize our community's emotional and physical well-being. So 2 things in that line are increasing our lower salary pay bands. So the minimum that you can earn being a staff member at Bikeworks, we have lifted that up to ensure that all staff are able to earn a living wage in a city with ever increasing cost of living. Then in addition to that, we've added 4 full-time positions and to reduce improve our capacity and reduce the burden on other staff. And then we've also moved 2 part-time staff to full-time to increase our capacity and to be able to provide everybody who works for Bikeworks with benefits and care. And also, my name is Monica. I'm a program manager and I use she, her pronouns. I forgot to lead with that. I'll kick it to you, Allie.
Thanks, Monica. I'm Allie. I use they, them pronouns. I am the recycle and reuse operations manager here at Bikeworks. Another thing that we looked at in terms of our internal culture was working on just the overall equity knowledge base for staff to increase. So a couple of things that we've done to implement that is we've started having quarterly race-based caucusing. So we have both the BIPOC staff members and the white staff members meet as groups in order to discuss different aspects of our racial identities and especially in terms of the white people on staff, like leveling up how we're showing up for our staff members of color. We've also devoted more time to having all staff meetings that are devoted to specific equity topics. And we've also increased our capacity for the amount of intersectional trainings that we're having at Bikeworks. In the past 2 years, we've had multiple trainings regarding disability, gender, trans equity, and also what's the word I'm thinking of? It's not conflict resolution, but bystander intervention. And so in order to set aside more staff time, in order to have everyone be able to participate in all of these meetings and trainings, we also closed our bike shop on Wednesdays. Our bike shop staff were less able to participate in these all staff initiatives, but by closing the shop on Wednesdays, we ensure that everyone has time to devote in their schedule to these really important equity topics. So I will kick it to Aaron.
Hey, it's Aaron Yoon, stewardship manager here at Bikeworks. Shout out to all the CCC folks that are here. Cool to see y'all. Yeah, and I'm also a part of the culture committee. And I just wanted to touch on, oh yeah, this one is great. Just a big part of self-care and sick time is and our initiative is that we increased our sick pay from 10 days to 30 days. So, our staff can take the time they need, especially if they're dealing with any disabilities or chronic illnesses, mental health. And that was huge. I mean, that was a game changer for us. And, we collectively decided on that. And it was beautiful to see. And we're already seeing, the benefits and results of that, whether it's, if you need a counseling break or something like that, you can take sick time. You don't have to stress about, finding a time that works outside of work. So it's really great and just helps in so many ways, like even employee retention or and just saying that we care about everybody here on staff and as we want to grow and create a place where people can grow in their careers as well too, and this is a big part of that, and know that you can take care of yourself first and foremost. Yeah. All right, and then
Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah.
Cool. So another one of the things that we have been working on as part of our committee work has been to adjust our cost of living payment adjustment system. I know it's like, I'm long-winded, but essentially we pivoted from a percentage-based cost of living adjustment annually to a dollar value, a flat dollar amount increase for all staff. We wanted to recognize that the staff at the lower end of our pay bands and at the lower end of our pay structure are the folks who are most significantly affected by increasing cost of living. And when we increase pay, if we do a cost of living adjustment by percentage, the top keeps getting higher and the bottom doesn't increase as much significantly. So this past year, into 2023, we adapted and we did a flat dollar value so that everybody on staff got the same cost of living wage increase. And we're hoping to kind of implement that moving forward as well, just to kind of address the inequities of like compounding disparity. All right, back to you, Allie.
All right, and then one last thing in terms of, there's more to talk about, but in terms of our internal culture is that in April of 2022, we rebooted our volunteer repair parties. We took a lot of feedback from the community about how these were ran, and we're now focusing with a really specific emphasis on fostering an inclusive atmosphere, investing in the people that are volunteering with, and encouraging a volunteer ownership of the Bikeworks space. So if anyone's been to some volunteer repair parties lately, they're run a little bit differently, and our adult education coordinator, Jim, has done a lot of work in terms of making that a really successful program, and it has been really great to welcome our community back into the space to volunteer with us last year in April.
All right, thanks, Allie. I'm going to kick off the next section, which is community engagement. So one way we've been engaging the community is through offering affinity-based programming. And this is programming for youth and adults that identify as BIPOC. BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. In addition to that,
what's the Bikeworks thing?
Pardon?
Oh.
Oh, okay, maybe somebody accidentally was unmuted. All right, well, we do have time for questions at the end, if you do have questions, so we'll get to those. But yeah, so just continuing on, so we offer programming specific for folks who identify as BIPOC and or women, non-binary, et cetera, specific affinity programs through partnerships. So an example is with Franklin High School, which was in spring 2021. There's a BIPOC leadership cohort. Also, we've partnered with Sweet Lines, a mountain biking company, education company, Rainier Beach High School, Young Women Empowered, Spin Girls, North Star Cycling Club, Ampersand Bike Club, which is formerly known as the Asian Bicycle Club, and Friends on Bikes. So these programs and partnerships are in addition to our year-round youth and adult programs, camps, writing, and other volunteer opportunities that are open to the community. And in total, these programs are transformative because they offer opportunities for people to challenge themselves, to connect with each other, and to identify new abilities or expand their ideas of what they thought they could do. And I'll hand it over to you, Aaron.
Yeah, and another way that we engage with the community is that starting in late 2001, we started doing more community rides. After all, what brings us together is the bicycle, and so we thought it'd be great every quarter just have an opportunity to invite people to the South End and be with us in community on bicycles. So we try 3 or 4 times a year to have these community rides. Where it's free sliding scale registration and kind of following that community-centric model that that's such a beautiful way to do things. And in these events, we like to try to highlight other partners in our community and other nonprofits. So often there'll be a optional donation for highlighting other beautiful organizations and neighbors in our community. And so trying to harness our power to bring people together and shed light on some of our great partners. And so yeah, so it's been great to do those quarterly community rides, and we have one coming up. I'll tell you about that later. And yeah, and just continuing that free and sliding scale theme for Bike Excitement, our big annual celebration, Sunday, April 30th. Yeah, we want to be inclusive. I know it's a fundraiser, and it's important that we, for all of our events and all of our organizations to, raise a lot of money. But we want to make sure that everybody gets a seat at the table. So we have free tickets available for our big celebration and fundraiser and sliding scale. So just trying to be more inclusive, especially even and find kind of creative ways to do that, whether it's gathering at a fundraiser or different community events. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Aaron. Another thing that we've done is we've created and have been implementing a community survey of all of our constituents to help us better evaluate our progress towards becoming an anti-racist and inclusive organization. So if you sign up for one of our events or participate in one of our classes, we are asking to fill out a survey, and please do that because it helps us learn how we're showing up in the community. We gather a lot of information from the community, and it helps us to be relevant. It helps us show up again as an inclusive and anti-racist organization. So when you are surveyed and you sign up for a BikeWorks event, we want you to know that the information that you share us helps us be a better organization, helps us to realize our goals, helps us to fulfill our strategic plan, ultimately helps us better serve the community. Cassini?
Thanks, Ed. So last but not least, in our community engagement section, I'm going to talk about accessibility. And so part of inclusivity is being accessible to the community. And that's also part of equity. And we've prioritized increasing the accessibility of our programming in the following ways. So we've added, these are just a few examples. So we've added an accessibility section to our participant medical form to learn about specific support and or accommodations that people need to fully participate in our programs and biking experiences. We are also identifying resources and processes to address those needs, including, for example, procuring adaptive bikes and equipment to increase physical accessibility. And an example that I'll highlight which was really driven forward by Tom and Allie, who are both on this call, was the completion of an ESS bike built for a summer camp participant. In addition to that, we were able to procure a trike, an adaptive trike, for an adult youth facilitator who was from one of our partnering organizations, so that they could more fully engage in our bike camp. In addition to those examples, we are committed to continuing to learn about access needs in our community. And part of that is educating ourselves and educating others about those needs. And also to better include adaptive cycling for youth and adults in our program and for disabled community members.
I think it's still you, Cassini. Sorry.
I realize I have the next section, no problem. Okay, so the next section we'll talk about is job opportunities and what we've been doing in that arena. So one exciting thing is we've expanded our paid internships and apprenticeships to include all departments in our organization and to provide a wide range of job opportunities at BikeWorks is our ultimate goal, from alumni to youth alumni, including bike mechanics, communications, fundraising, and retail being the bike shop. And so we have had 2 interns and we have 1 continuing intern right now at BikeWorks who is doing awesome and will be soon to be LCI certified. So we're excited for him in that. All right, I'll pass it to you, Monica.
Thank you. I just have a quick addition. And this kind of is, we're figuring out exactly how this fits into all of our kind of different departments. And right now it's really focused on our youth programming, but we're looking at how we can involve it in our adult programming and in our partnership work. But we are Park Tool School certified, so we can offer mechanic certification programs, which opens up doors for us in a bunch of different ways, including, job skills training, obviously, but also in partnering with public schools and being able to offer credits and different kinds of things along those lines. There are so few opportunities for young people in particular, young people of color, but also just people in the world to get a certification in bike mechanics. So we're grateful and lucky to be able to offer a certification as a part of our programming moving forward. Park Tool School. Aaron, you want to talk about the backyard?
Yeah,
cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, so on the physical space side, it's been really cool to see. If y'all have been to the Yellow House right behind me on the screen here, y'all might see the beautiful front. But for some years now, the back end of the shop has been, kind of where we, threw a bunch of our tires and kind of just excess storage space. So, last year or about a year and a half, 2 years ago, we got together and we did our best to clean it out, and also got some volunteers to help clean it throughout that time. And it would just spark our imaginations of what the space could be. It could be, once we cleared out all the stuff, one of our community rides, we had people gather in there and it felt really right. And so now we're, thinking bigger, and we're trying to reimagine the shop backyard to be a full community gathering space. And so we're currently working with Build LLC on a kind of a bigger structure and design improvements. And so it can be more functional for the community gathering spaces. And so, imagine a place where the youth can hang out and come and, share a meal or, have a conversation or, and just, ride in there. And so I think it's really exciting to envision that part of our physical space to be kind of very open to the community. So that's what we're excited about on that end. Monica, as far as the youth lounge?
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. I think, really along the same lines, we have been trying to improve our physical space. It's kind of coming out of COVID, so many things are remote and so many of us are used to operating remotely, and we're remembering the value of gathering in person and like sharing space and sharing food and all those kinds of things. So we did a makeover of our youth lounge led by our youth program participants. We have an action picture here. I will say it is done now. It's not still half painted, but we had youth participants come and we got paint donations from staff and community members, and we got couch donations from staff and community members, and one of our interns actually donated a PlayStation. So we now have a very comfortable space for youth to come and gather between programming, which just makes programming more accessible, especially with youth who are relying on parents for transportation, and do homework, relax, whatever it may be. So we have a space that is owned by the youth at this point, and that has really made a change for us in terms of being able to attract and retain youth, and also just youth having ownership over the space is so important to us. So thank you. Yes, also, if you want to see it fully completed, feel free to come by. We're happy to give you a tour. It does look pretty rad. Back to
Thanks,
you, Ed.
Monica.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
Aaron and Allie and Katsiti. So as you can see, we've been pretty busy over the past 2 years. The changes that we are making are systemic, with a sustainability in mind. That takes time. It takes collaboration, and it takes commitment. And moving forward, in 2023, we have more. And again, Bikeworks is a 26-year-old organization. And through collaboration and through honest dialogue and authentic dialogue internally at Bikeworks, and our committee work, we're able to identify what we value and what we want to move forward, and moving those goals and those things forward with as much buy-in and input as possible. So we've been pretty busy, in addition to doing our normal everyday work. What we have on tap for 2023 is conflict resolution education. We are taking a look at our healthcare benefits. We have a very generous healthcare package, but we also know that how can we get better? How can we make sure that equity is in every aspect of our healthcare and our healthcare benefits? We're also looking at merit performance measurement. We're looking at and having honest conversations, do the traditional merit rewards and performance evaluations like 360s and so forth. Does that serve us? Does that serve our culture? Is it part of what we want to do? And rethinking, can we create something different? Is there something out there we can borrow and make our own? But we're having very honest conversations about that as well. Also, we have coming up in 2023 are a number of events. I think Aaron alluded to this earlier. Bike Excitement, our biggest fundraiser event of the year, is April 30th. We're going back to the Renton Pavilion. I hope to see you all there, and promise it will be a great inspirational party. We have the Tour de Floors, which is coming up in the end of March 26th, which is a Sunday, which is an alley cat style quote unquote race. We have a few summer rides that are coming up. Summer community ride that's on August 26th. And then we have another ride in November 4th, that's coming up as well. And all these community rides are free. We want to invite you and your friends and all of our constituents in to just ride and vibe and have a good time, learn about Bikeworks, explore the community, connect with board and staff, and just connect with other community members. Another thing we have coming up in 2023 is we are planning a board and staff racial equity education plan that will take place in August and September. And I think Allie alluded to this earlier. We're continuing our race-based caucusing. That's ongoing. That's a part of what we do at Bikeworks. Another big thing we're doing is taking a look at our branding and reimagining our logo. And also taking time to spend time with our mission and vision statements. Do they still resonate with us? Are there any changes we should make? What are our values? Have those changed over the years? Spending some time on that and repositioning, revisioning, or retooling our mission and vision statements. So again, as you can see, we're up to a lot at Bikeworks, in addition to our everyday programming, the everyday workings in the shops, the everyday workings in recycle reuse, and our adult programs. So we're pretty busy, and we're pretty passionate about our mission and being of service to the community. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'll do our best to answer those. We'll have a Q&A and more discussion later on in tonight's program. And tonight, right now, what we want to do for the moment is split up into breakout groups and breakout rooms for small group discussion. We'll have 12 to 15 minutes for breakout discussions. And two primary questions of those breakout groups are, what can we learn from you in your community? And please share examples and solutions that we can learn from to advance racial equity, expand access, and foster inclusivity. When we do break out into these breakout groups, there are a couple group norms that we'd ask everyone to follow. One is put relationships first, assume best intent, but own your impact. Step up and step back. Elmo, enough, let's move on. Speak from your own experience. So again, we're going to take about 15 minutes, 12 to 15 minutes for breakouts. And again, share freely. This is how we learn. This is how we become a better organization and provide better programming and better services to the community is based on your input. So.
Thank you. I just, we're doing so good on time. Thank you all of the speakers that I just set the breakout rooms to 15 minutes. And I just wanted to explain the Jamboard link briefly that Elise just dropped in the chat. That is like, as many of you can put sticky notes on there as you want. So at least one note taker per group would be great, but more than one of you are welcome to add sticky notes. That will be a collective note-taking place for us. And just make sure that you see that you can click. There are 2 different slides for each of the questions. So remember to arrow back and forth. Any process questions before I send you off into your breakout room? All right, have fun.
I think, welcome back, everyone. Great discussions. Really appreciate group breakouts. Always so enlightening. Always such great ideas to come from them. I think, Jess, are you going to share the Jamboard or the whiteboard for any themes that are highlighted from the breakouts?
I will do that.
Okay, I don't know. Or if it's, while that's happening, is there anyone on the call this evening that would like to share out a couple themes from your breakout group?
I can share one of ours.
Sure. Thank you.
And I've heard some stories about this from I think maybe Aaron, just about like how donations work. And sometimes they may not be the greatest of people, but we take their money. And it's just kind of like, how do we think about our donors and how do we engage them and how do we kind of know who we're taking money from and do they also have an anti-racist outlook and how can we do our best to kind of make sure that our fundraising is in line with kind of our values. And so that was kind of one that we talked about.
Got it. Thank you, Ginger.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard, obviously, because we need money. So, but it's a balance.
We, one thing that was brought up in our breakout room was just one thing that is kind of absent from our policy is any policy that when it comes to caretaking roles like parenting, caring for a sick or elder family member or community member. So one thing that came up was just including, I don't know exactly, there are a lot of different ways that those policies can happen. Flexible hours was the language that was brought up in our breakout group, but just having infrastructure for folks who are taking care of other people.
Some comments that were shared in our breakout group number 1 were breaking down barriers between departments that might be occupational or physical. So for example, and a shop, which may be outward facing versus office environment. And someone spoke to seeing that across different organizations. And we kind of spoke to what's been done at Bikeworks to help reduce those barriers, including things like closing the shop on Wednesdays, adjusting the pay scales and boosting or prioritizing pay increases for those who are at the lower ends of pay ranges. And then another note that someone made was just that they were happy to see the effort at Bikeworks around bringing people together, even in this remote or hybrid kind of work environment. So those are a few things that were highlighted.
Thanks, Cassini. Anyone else care to share?
Yeah, lastly, in our group, I think it's important. We talked about translation services, of documents, of meetings, of whatever it is, and multiple, and figuring out too, what are the languages, or what are the, I mean, they're all important, but what, like, identifying our audience, who we need to communicate to, how we, and having it like be all the way across the board. So that's what we talked about.
Got it. Thanks, Rich. So we're at the point for general questions and answers. I see the chat has been very active. Again, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We want to open it up for the next 15 to 20 minutes for general Q&A about Bikeworks, about the strategic plan or an idea that you're inspired by this evening. And then we're going to answer those just by all staff that's here tonight. It's an open forum. If there's anybody out there, or Elise, if there's anything in the chat you want to start with, let's dive in.
Roxy, are you still on the call?
Yes, hello.
Hi, somebody asked you to share, you were going to share a resource about translating bike terms.
Oh, yeah, I found sorry, I'm not keeping up with the chat because I'm on my phone.
Okay.
I will try and find that and pop it in the chat.
Have you used that practically in your rides or other events? And if so, how did that go?
It was more of a reference tool for the bikery shop. I don't know that they actually ever printed it out though. But that is something that we talked about having in the shop when I was on the board.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, if you don't mind sharing that, that would be great.
I know we've got some resources here at Bikeworks for Spanish translation as well. Unfortunately, that's all we've got, but we would be happy to share that out for other folks who it could be useful to.
Mark, did you want to ask your question? I'm also happy to read it for you if you prefer.
Oh, you could read it. Go ahead.
Okay, Mark asks that back in 2021, we were talking about the emergence of e-bikes and whether that's part of our strategy. He's curious to hear what, if any, impact they've had on the shop, repair training programs, or other aspects of the Bikeworks strategy. The adaptive e-bike was super awesome. Maybe Allie or Tom, do you want to talk about e-bikes more?
Hey, I definitely can talk a little bit about what we did with an e-bike, but this seems like it might be more of a shop question, but correct me if I'm wrong, just in terms of how it's impacted sales. Because I don't think that we currently work on e-bikes, do we?
I think the Hilltopper partnership would be a cool thing to talk about.
Totally.
Maybe just lead with that.
We can definitely talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that we've identified e-bikes as something that's like obviously very popular right now, but when it comes to an accessibility standpoint, these bikes are often gotten by people who are using them for leisure or aren't necessarily using them as mobility aids. So they often aren't really accessible to folks who would like to use them outside of a recreational sense, especially for transportation. And adding an e-wheel to a bike can make it actually accessible to someone who might not be able to commute otherwise. So we've been trying to kind of work with this local company, Hilltopper, who we already have like a pretty great past relationship with, to figure out how to kind of create these prototypes of bikes for folks who might have a bike that they already love or are looking for something a little bit different, but that still functions pretty similarly to a bike that they're more comfortable with. Did I cover?
Yeah, I think that.
Great. Thanks,
But
Tom.
I can also just add a little note in terms of the shop. So because of the shop's space in terms of the physical floor plan, it makes it incredibly hard to bring e-bikes into the shop. So it's the policy that they're not technically worked on there at the moment, but it is something that we're seeing more and more of pretty constantly. With the way that e-bikes are manufactured and the way that they're able to be worked on, it would be very difficult to integrate them into repair training programs. Generally, most e-bike specific maintenance is going to be something that you don't actually work on the componentry. You end up sending the component back to the company and then they send you a replacement. So when I've worked in e-bike shops in the past, that's the standard practice for how all of that is repaired. And so overall, it doesn't super fit in with how we're trying to like revitalize bicycles at Bikeworks. But I think that as e-bikes become more and more popular in lots of different communities and they have this really important place in terms of accessibility, I think that it's going to be something that Bikeworks has to continue to look at and figure out how to like better integrate into many of our different programs and policies. But for now, that's kind of where it stands.
Yeah, I really appreciate that question too, because as the e-bike scene grows more and more, and maybe the prices come down, and maybe there's more standardization and something. I mean, I feel like we're still early in it, but as far as accessibility goes, I mean, it's kind of nice. Like I'll be riding up a hill, and someone that's like 70 years old is dropping me and stuff like that, and like getting more people on bikes, and it's really cool. We can see in the future.
Brittany, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, hey, Brittany from Community Cycling Center. I was at the first presentation when you rolled out the strategic plan. I was really excited to hear the updates, and I'm really inspired to hear how much you've accomplished over the last 2 years. I would like to learn more about how you navigate the decision-making process. And this might be too big of a question, but how have you been able to expand your programming and your outreach and staff to do that during some of the hardest times to be in the nonprofit sector?
It's kind of a twofold question.
Sure.
Jess,
can-
go ahead.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great.
Decision making
Yes.
is the big one for sure.
Yeah, decision making is a big one, and I welcome our other staff to chime in on this. And what we've been very successful and during COVID, we didn't have to lay off anyone. We closed for a short period of time, and we were able to repurpose staff either into the bike shop to help match and keep up with demand, or into the bike mobile. The bike mobile was out in the community 5 days a week, providing free or low-cost bike repair. And just we're very, very lucky that the majority of staff are expert bike mechanics, so we're able to do that and keep people employed. And we've also been very, very successful in writing grants, thanks to Elise, and writing multi-year grants specifically for specific positions. So for instance, we won a grant through King County, Best Starts for Kids, in an effort to help expand our youth programming. So we're able to add another coordinator in Tommy. And then we're also, we're awarded a grant through Boyne Employee Credit Union that focused on environmental sustainability. And that grant that we applied for was to expand our recycle reuse department. So that those fundings went directly to expanding and adding staff there. And then we're also applied through Murdoch Trust, which is based out of Vancouver, Washington, to expand our adult education programming. So we're able to add an additional staff member there. Each of these grants, with the exception of the Boyne Employer Credit Union grant, they are multi-year grants. So they're funding positions. So we have a mindset of, we can't expand unless we have the funding to do that. And then also, it was a budget decision that we made to add additional funding to get our youth and adult programming staff back to where it was before the pandemic. And then also provide sustainable funding. So it's not just a year-long thing. It's a multi-year long commitment. So we're getting better at applying for those grants. But that really has been the mindset we've had as far as, we want to get back to where we were before a pandemic, and we want to make it sustainable rather than a year commitment. But how do we grow sustainably, and how do we make this a permanent investment in our staff and our work?
And thanks, Ed. I'll chime in for Brittany and anybody else who works at a nonprofit that the Murdoch Trust, which funded our adult education program, basically you can apply anytime, and they do fund staffing, which is a little bit rare that a funder will just have an application process open all year round, and they're explicitly funding new staff members. It's kind of a doozy as applications go. So if anybody decides they want to go for it to hire new folks, I'd be happy to share resources to help navigate through that one, because it took a lot of time.
And I think it's important to note too that that's limited time funding. So we made the calculation that it was worth the risk to get the seed funding and then figure out how we were going to keep funding those positions. But it's a little bit like you cross your fingers and jump off a cliff. So here we are.
Yeah,
you're all picking up the tab, right?
And I have a question for Ed and Jess and Elise, probably. Would you say how much does it matter to have your own internal grants person to just solely focus on grants? Speaking to potential, the economics of it all versus.
And that's a great question, Aaron. And I also want to get to the second half of your question, Brittany, about collaborative decision making, and I think Allie, Tom, Elise, Cassini, Seth, any BikeWorks staff would love to have your input on that. But to your point, Aaron, it is, in my experience in nonprofit, the approach that we have at BikeWorks, I've never seen. It's a focus, and grants are like going to Vegas. You never know if you're going to win them. Like Jess said, fingers crossed. And to have a focus on it, to look for multi-year funding, and to have the simple, equation or strategy of applying for more grants. So if year one you applied for 10, year two you apply for 20, and we're getting better at telling our story. We're getting much better at telling our story, so. To your point, yes, it's worth the investment to have someone either full-time or three-quarter time. And that's not all that Elise does. There's communications there, there's donor development there, and having the same conversations with an organization in Tacoma about this, it is worth the investment. It's just part of our approach to our work. It's not something that's a sidebar. It's actually, it's a sustainable approach to our work. And again, in my my experience in nonprofit, I've never seen an organization do it as well as we do it, and that's an unbiased opinion. And the second half of your question, Brittany, as far as decision making, I'll open it up to BikeWorks staff to chime in on that.
I'm happy to share a perspective on it. In terms of our decision-making structure, we have a couple of different things in place. So the first off is that with the dissolution of the leadership team, our committees that work specifically towards all of our different strategic planning goals have somewhat replaced the overall leadership team, where there are people from every department on every single committee. And so there's a lot of different interdepartmental collaboration on these larger org projects, basically. And so in those committees, we're also doing work to advance our equitable decision-making. So for example, we have a equity-based decision-making tool that is a flow chart in terms of how we say yes and no to specific. It originated as like a bike mobile thing where it was just like, how do we determine where the bike mobile goes on which days? And it was just a flow chart that showed all of the different factors basically that we need to be examining every single time that we send that out into the community to make sure that the bike mobile isn't spending 90% of its time at, say, the Gates Foundation working on Gates Foundation employee bikes. So that's one way that we're able to kind of break down this certain executive oversight that can sometimes be a hindrance when it comes to equitable decision making. I'm sure that we could share the equity tool as long as the equity committee is fine with that. They were the ones who are doing a lot of work on that. And then another thing that we've done internally is also just having very transparent staff surveys. So we're able to send out a survey to staff to ask for everyone's opinion on a very specific thing that we're looking at. And then afterwards, we're able to basically consolidate all of those opinions into a report out that then we're kind of functioning in a somewhat of a majority rule situation where the staff have a certain amount of power over the executive oversight. If everyone comes in and says, this is something that all of us are wanting, that's how we're going to do it. And so in terms of our COLA implementation, where we went with a flat dollar COLA raise versus a percentage-based COLA raise, we sent out an all-staff survey surveying every single person on staff, hey, which raise system do you want? And through that, we were able to pass the flat raise system with an overwhelming majority. And so those are two different ways that we're specifically looking just beyond the committees in terms of how to deal with executive oversight, but we're still doing a lot of work internally at how do we break down the leadership structure to make sure that every single person on staff is empowered in the roles and the decisions that they're making. So I'd say it's a work in progress. But if any other staff members wanted to share other anecdotal insights or whatnot about executive decision making, they are welcome to.
Yeah, I would just elaborate on that. Like the leadership committee that Allie's referring to was formerly directors and maybe the ED, perhaps a handful of managers only. So there's very little of the organization. That being dissolved was a big thing. And then creating the committees. Everybody who's an employee has to be on a committee. Not that any employee wouldn't want to be part of the process, but it does put you directly into being bought in to some aspect of the community. And then us making that big decision to just close the shop on Wednesdays kind of really helped everyone too, because it was kind of allowing a lot of members of staff who are typically busy, the shop, they're the most isolated, they're the most busy. They just said, hey, we want them to be able to be part of the process. And we want everybody to just have time to be in these committees and to make decisions and be able to put, how you're feeling and what you want for the organization out there. Those were some other big steps, just to elaborate on that.
Yeah, and I would just add one more thing is that we've really changed how we spend staff meeting time. I think staff meetings used to be more of like a time to report out. And it's now a lot more like discussion and decisions collectively. It means that we cover a lot less at our staff meetings, and it also means that there's things that kind of get pushed down the road because we only meet every other week as a staff. But I think both setting the agendas collaboratively, we have like a shared Google Doc where people add agenda items, and then kind of some shared responsibility around facilitation and note taking is all just kind of like part of the shift for us.
Collaborative decision-making is definitely more time intensive and longer to come to consensus than one person calling all the shots. So if you're in an organization that wants to do stuff like that, just be ready to devote more time to it. That's a big learning thing for us, I think.
Yeah, one thing I want to share from my experience of that there's executive decisions and there's like the collaborative decisions, and having a clear, like, you know, like if we know what they are, everyone knows what they are, then that's kind of a good area to be in. But it needs, you know, that's how it's got to, it's pretty straightforward in this regards. Like, it's like decisions need to be made promptly, and the collaborative, having meetings and meetings and meetings to do something that if it's high priority, that it has to be a different thing in my mind. So
it's really hard.
We face that too over at the Community Cycling Center. Thank you all for taking the time to answer my secret two-part question.
You're welcome. Yeah, it's hard, and it also it's part of the process. So if it were easy, we wouldn't be doing it. It should be hard, and in that, I think you get the best results, you get the best product, for lack of a better term. But it's I think sometimes if you're not used to this process, it seems like something's broken or something is it shouldn't be that is the process. The difficulty at times, the length of the decision making, the thoroughness of the decision making, that is it. And so we've committed to it, and we remind ourselves of it. So it's and we choose it. We choose it to lead our organization that way.
Yep. And I'll say all the energy and time we've put into it has been 100% worth it, without a doubt. I think anybody on staff who's been around long enough will agree. I've been here for 6 years, and we always want to go further and get better, but I'll say the positions we find ourselves in now are a lot better than they have been in the past sometimes, and it's because of all the time and effort and collaboration we've put into it.
So we're at 7:19. Thanks, Seth. We're at 7:19, and we're way ahead of schedule. So are any other questions that are in the chat, or anything that's not in the chat that anyone would like to share, discuss, dive into?
Ed, when do we start working on the next plan?
Pardon?
When would we start work on the 26 and beyond plan?
In November of 2025. No, December 1st, 2025. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're making a lot of progress on this, and I look back and, you know, the past 2 years have been tremendous change. And you know, we also need to look at part of the strategic, our current strategic plan is Columbia City the place where we are, where we stay? You know, the yellow house is kind of the heart of Columbia City, and how does that continue to serve our need? Most importantly, how does that continue to serve our constituents' needs with the diversity of Seattle moving further south? So, you know, it's not unlikely or impossible for the organization to grow out of its strategic plan. I've been involved in that before, so, you know, who knows? Maybe in a year and a half, we'll have to tweak some things. But one thing that I do know, when we do start our next planning process, you know, how we've done this with beloved community and racial equity task force and just the year-long process. You know, in my 30-year career, it's one of the most thorough, engaging processes I've been through. To answer your question, Patrick, I don't know, but I know it will be like that. It should be like that. So, and hopefully you're still a board member at that time.
I'll hang in there for sure.
Thank you.
Just thinking about, you know, how much time and effort went into getting to where we're at. You know, it was a significant effort, not just by board members and staff and yourself, but, you know, we had a task force, and we had folks, you know, jumping in, and, you know, it was a huge community effort. It was, you know, it's exciting to think about it, but also a bit daunting to think, you know, how much went into getting to where we're at. So,
yeah.
My battery died.
Can I jump in with just a little thank you before I hand it over back to you, Ed?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to give a little shout out to our sponsors. I think when we talk about having a strategic plan where equity is infused in all of our work, that does not exclude our fundraising. And we invited our sponsors to participate in some pretty groundbreaking, edgy, vulnerable, difficult conversations with us as part of our exploration into what does it look like to have robust, honest relationships and not just have transactional relationships with the folks who are funding our work. So I just wanted to shout out our many sponsors who participated in that and highlight the sponsors who have returned for 2023. This is a growing list, a work in progress. So it's a really cool mix of big companies, small companies, and shout out to Aaron and Ed for your collaboration on that work as well.
Thanks, Jess. Yeah, this work would not be possible without our sponsors, and engaging them in an authentic way that centers social justice and racial equity, and that's part of our commitment. So thank you for that reminder. So we're at 7:23. What's next? There's a couple different ways to engage with BikeWorks and what we're doing. Again, we have the community ride on the 23rd of March, Tour de Fleurs, the second time we've done it. We're looking forward to that. It's on a Sunday. This year, I think Mike Buendia is guaranteed sunshine, 80 degrees for that ride. And on April 30th, Bike Excitement, again, that's our big fundraiser of the year. Last year was the first year we went back in person after COVID at the Rented Pavilion. It was a huge success. We're looking forward to the same party this year. So please put that on your calendar and planning to attend. We're excited about that. Feel free to stay, continue to talk. You know, just because we're going to end now does not mean that if there's questions that have come up, we're going to be here for about 10 or 15 minutes. I'm hanging out chatting, and you know, if there's more questions and more thoughts, more resources to share with us, we're all ears. We welcome it. So thank you everyone for being here tonight. We really appreciate your commitment to Bike Works. Again, we're always available for your insight and your thoughts, and really appreciate you being here. So thank you.